LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the March 4th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's 13 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, informative, media criticism and political analysis fair use show for you tonight. The political comedy source tonight is both last night's Saturday Night Live, including Alec Baldwin returning in his role as Donald Trump, despite him having a Twitter feud with Donald Trump about playing Donald Trump over the last several days. So I'll have some excerpts from that cold open to start the show in just a minute. And then I'll have an excerpt from the Saturday Night Live Weekend Update. I thought there were a couple funny jokes, and actually a couple funny jokes in Bill Maher's monologue, all about the main topic, the one topic this week, Trump chaos, more Trump chaos. Like, this could be the most chaotic week, or it just seems in some ways to be getting worse and worse. He's losing staff. He's like having these wild fluctuations in policy, especially on guns and trade tariffs on aluminum and steel this week. I described that whole, that's all in the video description I put down for the summary of the topic. Also down there you can find my clip list. These are the 13 clips I'm using, my notes for, how I remember what's in the clips. You can read along if that helps you. And anyway, I will also have a bonus Sandy clip at the end when Sandy came and started the show. My dog Sandy is my one live studio audience member, though she pretty much sleeps during the whole show. I hope you aren't sleeping during the whole show, and maybe to perk you up, I will give you my first clip from Saturday Night Live, the cold open. Alec Baldwin, I think, his impression of Donald Trump is really over the top. It's not like trying to be an accurate impression. It's more like huge caricature. But I thought the writers at Saturday Night Live wrote him some fairly good jokes, and as you'll see also in the Weekend Update, that clip that follows. But I have like 3 clips from the cold open edited together. The first is the Anderson Cooper intro where they describe, I give away the first joke, sorry, is CNN, your home for impeachment porn. And in some ways I think the mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, not Fox News of course, is giving me impeachment porn over time. Like, another breaking story, this could make this, this is what's going to bring us impeachment in 2019 after the Democrats take back the House. And then all about Trump chaos and a little bit about guns and trade in this. It's about 2.5 minutes from last night's Saturday Night Live cold open over here.
Good evening, I'm Anderson Cooper, and this is CNN, your #1 source for impeachment porn.
But the youth of America deserve to feel safe and secure in their schools because, folks, I can only run into so many schools and save everybody. If I could, I'd run into all of them, even without a weapon. I'd burst through the doors, and I'd be running so fast. I'm actually a very fast runner. People don't know that. I'd be running so fast, the guy with the gun wouldn't even know what hit him. Bing, bing, ding, dong, dang, he's finished, okay? So the schools are safe now, but I wouldn't stop there, because I'm on a roll. I just keep running and running. I'd run to North Korea, again, completely unarmed. I'd find little rocket man, ping, pong, pang, ping, ping, boom. I'd pick him up and throw him right over the Great Wall of Korea. And if I have to make America's schools safe all by myself, I will. Just like how I'm running the White House all by myself. Because these people who work for me keep resigning. Hope Hicks, she's like a daughter to me, so smart, so hot. She resigned. I hate seeing her go, but I love watching her walk away. Boom, boom, boom. Jared Kushner's basically the hottest chick left in the place. And he's probably going to jail soon, so he's out, but that should be it, okay? Everyone else is staying, right, McMaster? Are you staying, am I right? He'll always stand by my side, great guy. Anyway, they're all beating us. China, Japan, Wakanda, okay? Wakanda is laughing at us, right? They've got flying cars, people in Wakanda. That's why I announced these steel and aluminum tariffs this week. People are going nuts about it. I brought back the steel industry by destroying the auto industry and tanking the stock market. Impressive. So impressive. Look at that. Both sides hated it. I don't care. I said I was going to run this country like a business. That business is a Waffle House at 2 a.m. Crazies everywhere, staff walking out in the middle of their shift, managers taking money out of the cash register to pay off the Russian mob.
And that was my favorite part there at the end, where that he's running his administration like a Waffle House at 2 a.m. And I used to have some late shifts, and I've been to some of those Waffle Houses at 2 a.m., so I kind of know what the writers were talking about. There were some good jokes in there. I like the Wakanda jokes, but like I said, the impression is not. It's not a great impression for accuracy, but for comic effect, I don't know. You tell me what you think down in the comment section. Apparently, starting this week, the live comments are going to be, as long as I use this archive, as long as I don't have stream problems in this archive, the archive of this live stream is the recorded video that I release. You'll be able to play the live comments in real time, and it will show up in the recorded video. That's at least according, this will be the first week I'm trying it out. So usually I spend all this time and effort trying to save those comments, and I have problems because I get the little spinning wheel on my browser. So maybe this will be the first week I don't have to do that. I've been trying to do it still this week because I don't know what's going to happen. I'm getting that little stupid spinning wheel because I have a 6-year-old MacBook, and, well, you don't need to hear about my problems, but back to the problems of our country and Donald Trump and the chaos in his White House. That you'll actually see a graphic at the beginning of the Saturday Night Live Weekend Update clip I'm about to show, where Colin Jost talks about both the chaos at the White House and Hope Hicks specifically, and then you'll see Michael Che talk, give, I think, actually a fairly good joke about the gun debate. And, you know, Colin Jost and Michael Che are not just the anchors of Weekend Update. I think they're 2 of, is it 4 head writers? I don't know how many people get to be head writers. It seems like they're giving out titles like hotcakes over there, or like waffles at a Waffle House at 2 a.m. maybe. I don't know. Here's the Colin Jost and Michael Che jokes on the chaos at the White House this week over here.
Okay, I have a serious question. Who still works in our government? Like, who still does an actual government job? At this point, the White House is like that dead mall in your hometown. It's just a sunglasses kiosk and a couple of raccoons fighting in a JCPenney. Hope Hicks, President Trump's communications director and one of his longest-serving advisors, said Wednesday that she planned to resign to pursue other opportunities. You know things are bad when a 29-year-old with no experience who works directly for the President of the United States thinks, I got to get out of this dead-end job. She's resigning to pursue other opportunities the same way people on the Titanic decided they wanted to start seeing other boats. It was also reported this week that Jared Kushner, who, by the way, is the only guy who makes me look ethnic, was also stripped of his top-secret security clearance this week. And at that exact moment, though he didn't yet know why, Steve Bannon got his first erection in 10 years.
During a bipartisan meeting to discuss school safety, President Trump called for more gun control. But NRA officials are now saying that after a private meeting with the president, he has backed off that position. Oh, really? So he was alone in a room with a bunch of gun enthusiasts, and they somehow managed to change his mind. You know, that once happened to me. I once spoke out against gang violence, but then after a very private meeting with the Bloods on the roof of my building, I realized I disagree with myself, too.
So yeah, I like that joke, like I said, from Michael Che at the end. You can let me know what you think about those jokes. And they brought up the Jared Kushner issue, the gun issue. Later they brought up the trade issue, and those are, you know, the staff shakeups, the trade war issue, and of course the gun issue are all the parts of the Trump chaos, more Trump chaos topic. And like I said, I like those jokes there from Weekend Update. I thought they were better than what we usually get with it. I tend to be critical of the writers, and this week I thought they did a fairly good job on those two skits. And there were some other good skits that are also, pretty much all the good stuff is available on the Saturday Night Live YouTube channel, which, these are just a couple of the videos that I put links to all the videos that I use down in the video description. The last comedy clip I want to show you is 3 minutes. This is, again, 2 clips edited together from Bill Maher's monologue on Friday night, also on the main topic of the chaos in the Trump White House, the exit of Hope Hicks, who was apparently like Trump's security blanket or one of the last of his inner circle other than Ivanka and Jared. And then the second part is about Jared's problems, and you'll see Bill Maher makes a Jewish joke about Jared and then claims he has the right to, for a reason that I will discuss with you as to whether it's a valid reason or not after we watch this 3 minutes from Bill Maher's monologue last Friday over here.
Even by normal Trump weeks, this was, I mean, so much crazy shit happened. I'm just going to have to go through it chronologically. First off, you heard Hope Hicks was voted off the island. And, Hope Hicks, this was Trump's, his work wife, his emotional companion animal, whatever she did there. And this has really thrown him off because she was one of the few people he could work with. They were a very good team. She was a former model, and everything he says makes you want to throw up. So, and it's very... It's very ironic because he was very dependent on Hope Hicks, and his whole presidency is about giving Hicks hope. So it was, but listen, she is 29 years old. 29, the communications director for the president of the United States, of America. A communications director, by the way, that no one in America has ever heard speak. In Fire and Fury, he says her main job during the campaign was steaming Trump's Husky Boy sack suit while it was on him. She would sit in a chair in front of him and blow dry his crotch. Also on her resume, she used to date Corey Lewandowski, who was Trump's campaign manager and married at the time. Then she dated Rob Porter, who had to leave the White House earlier in the month in a wife-beating scandal. I'm not that familiar with soap operas, but I think in the next episode, Trump gets amnesia and Mike Pence reveals he's a woman. I think that's what happened. Okay. So, oh, yes, another news from the Lancaster clan. I mean, the Lannister clan. Shit, I should have gotten the HBO joke right, shouldn't I? The knives are really out for Jared Kushner. He lost his top security clearance. There's an Archie Bunker meathead thing going on with General Kelly. And, oh, it turns out that every inexplicable, fucked up thing that's happened in the last year is really because Jared's trying to get $1.2 billion to pay for a building he shouldn't have bought. Really, this is all making sense now. He had meetings with 2 banks in the White House who gave him $500 million, and his security clearance has over 100 omissions and errors on it. I can say this because my mother was Jewish. He's too stupid to be a Jew. I want to see his birth certificate. I do. I think it's going to say birthplace, Alaska. Real name, Jared Palin.
So I like that last joke about Jared Palin, but do you think that the fact that Bill Maher has a Jewish mother gives him that right to make that Jewish joke? I don't know. That seems like a weird way to justify being able to tell that joke. I don't know whether that joke, I'm not like really criticizing that joke particularly, but it just seems a weird justification to me. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And I thought Bill Maher had a couple good jokes within that 3-minute set I just showed, but that's the last of the political comedy, and now I want to get to the actual news clips, and I actually have news summaries from all 5 of the big 5 corporate outlets, which I forgot to say are ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, what we call the corporate media here in the United States. And so I'm going to first have the best of the news summaries, I think, from NBC's Meet the Press. It's also the longest. It's about 3 minutes, 45 seconds long, or 47 seconds long to be completely accurate. Looking at my little streaming software here, it shows me the exact length. And I think Chuck Todd did a really good job of summing up the chaos in the White House. As usual, it starts with a live introduction from Chuck Todd, and then he goes over to the package with all the details and the clips. And I particularly like the way it starts with the Spinal Tap reference. Happens to be my wife's favorite movie, and so I was watching this with her, and she enjoyed the Spinal Tap reference. Is that, well, you can tell me what you think about the Spinal Tap reference and the completeness of the coverage of the chaos in the Trump White House compared to the other 4 corporate news outlets that I'm going to show you afterwards. This is Chuck Todd, NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
Sunday morning, if this were Spinal Tap, we'd say this is the week that things at the White House got turned up to 11. Newspaper headlines around the country chronicle events as a White House built on chaos was even more chaotic and apparently dysfunctional than usual. And at the center of it all is a president who is increasingly looking isolated, unhappy with his attorney general, with his chief of staff, with his national security advisor, and now soon to be without perhaps his most trusted loyalist who announced her resignation this week. Perhaps also his son-in-law, who is increasingly under fire for mixing his personal business with White House duties. And of course, maybe soon to be without the person he's closest to of all, his daughter. If all of this weren't enough, looming over this administration is Special Counsel Robert Mueller and a Russia investigation that seems to be moving closer to the White House by the day.
Thank you very much. Do you still have confidence in Attorney General Sessions?
President Trump increasingly isolated and lashing out as Special Counsel Robert Mueller peels away his defenses, tightening his net around the president's inner circle. The president is besieged on many fronts. Hope Hicks?
Hope Hicks is a tremendously talented person.
His communications director, one of Mr. Trump's closest and longest-serving aides, abruptly resigned Wednesday after 8 hours of testimony on the Russia probe in which she admitted to telling white lies on behalf of the president. That left Mr. Trump seething.
You have ups and downs in administrations. Her departure is going to be a surprise, and a shocking thing.
Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, was stripped of his top-secret security clearance by the White House chief of staff amid news that the special counsel is investigating Kushner's efforts during the transition to secure financing for his family's real estate properties from entities in Russia and the Middle East.
I think the Russians are very, very clever in terms of how they exploit relationships.
In his last public statement to the media, more than 7 months ago, Kushner denied those relationships.
I had no improper contacts. I have not relied on Russian funds for my businesses.
John Kelly, reportedly intent on sidelining Kushner and Ivanka Trump. The chief of staff is defending his own handling of the Rob Porter domestic abuse scandal, telling reporters off camera this week, I have absolutely nothing to even consider resigning over. Jeff Sessions, the president lashed out again at his attorney general, calling him disgraceful this week for not using Justice Department lawyers to push back on what he believes are surveillance abuses at the FBI.
The president is very frustrated about this entire, what he calls witch hunt and hoax, the entire investigation.
Sessions responded curtly in a statement, quote, as long as I am the Attorney General, I will continue to discharge my duties with integrity and honor. And he had this very public unity dinner with his deputy, Rod Rosenstein. Mr. Trump has taken pride in his ability to thrive in the midst of the chaos he likes to create.
We have to be unpredictable. We have to be unpredictable. We have to be unpredictable, folks.
But now aides say the president's consuming anger at Mueller is making him erratic, even unglued, spoiling for a fight, any fight, the president decided to pick one on trade, announcing new tariffs against the advice of many of his top advisors and without any internal review, tweeting, "Trade wars are good and easy to win."
It'll be 25% for steel. It'll be 10% for aluminum.
Joining me now is President Trump's Commerce.
And I'll actually have a little excerpt of Chuck Todd's interview with the Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, where Chuck Todd almost like laughs in his face coming up. That's clip number 10, I believe. But now I need to move on to clip number 5, which is the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, which is much shorter than that last one, although I think it includes, if I'm remembering correctly, I guess we'll find out when we watch it, I think it includes a clip from Admiral Mike Rogers, which is really important. I know that that's something that George Stephanopoulos brought up with Senator Chris Murphy. That's going to be the first clip I show after I show all these news summaries, because it's a really important issue that Trump is like not ordered his national security people to either retaliate against Russia or to do anything regarding 2018 to protect the United States from additional election hacking. But I think this week with George Stephanopoulos clip from ABC from this morning does a pretty good job, almost as good as the NBC much longer clip, doing a summary of the chaos at the White House. You'll see here that George Stephanopoulos here talks about, like, in case you lost track, here's everything bad that happened this last week, which I like. And like I said, I think it includes that Admiral Mike Rogers clip over here.
Good morning. Hope you had a good week. And in case you lost track, here are just a few things that happened at the White House this week. The president's closest personal aide resigned, just one day after she told the House Intelligence Committee that working for the president required her to tell lies. Hope Hicks was the president's 4th communications director, the 25th top official to leave since Inauguration Day. The president's son-in-law was stripped of his top-secret security clearance amid questions about his vulnerability to foreign manipulation and reports that his family business received more than $500 million in loans from banks that he met with in the White House. The president called his hand-picked attorney general disgraceful, the latest salvo in an unprecedented public war that's drawn the attention of special counsel Robert Mueller. This time, Jeff Sessions fought back, defying and enraging Trump by vowing to run the Justice Department with, quote, integrity and honor. And more than a year after America's intelligence agencies reached the unanimous verdict that Russia interfered in our elections, the admiral in charge of the National Security Agency told Congress that President Trump has not ordered any new actions to counter Russia's cyber threat. At any other time with any other White House, any one of these stories would trigger nonstop coverage, full-scale scandal watch. And I didn't even include the gyrations on guns and trade. It almost makes you feel sorry for Chief of Staff John Kelly.
The last thing I wanted to do was walk away from one of the great honors of my life, being the Secretary of Homeland Security. But I did something wrong, and God punished me, I guess.
With that, let's bring in the man Kelly replaces, Chief of Staff Ryan.
And I'm not going to show any Reince Priebus clips. They had Reince Priebus and Chris Christie on. If you want to, that actually is kind of an interesting interview because they were both involved. They're both like people who were discarded by Donald Trump at some point, and yet they both still have some loyalty to him. Chris Christie almost seems like he's vying for some later job in the Trump administration. Why would anyone want to be like Colin Jost said in the Saturday Night Live clip? It's like switching, like Hope Hicks leaving for better opportunities is like someone leaving the Titanic for better boats. And why would Chris Christie want to like go back to the Titanic? I don't know, but I don't have any clips of Reince Priebus and Chris Christie. If you want to watch the entire This Week with George Stephanopoulos episode, there's a link down in the video description. But he did bring up that Admiral Mike Rogers issue where Trump is apparently not ordering any retaliation or any protection against 2018 election hacking, which is a little disturbing he's whether Trump colluded with Russia. We don't have that evidence yet, or we just have some inklings of it, like the June 9th, 2016 Donald Trump Jr. meeting in Trump Tower with all these Russians about getting dirt on Hillary Clinton. And I mean, there are certainly things that look like they could be collusion coming up, but whether or not there was collusion in 2016, why isn't Donald Trump doing everything he can as president to stop Russian election interference in 2018? That's what's so disturbing about that Mike Rogers clip. So kudos to ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos for playing that. Do you think that makes the ABC news summary better than the much longer NBC news summary? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And now I'm going to go to a even shorter news summary from CNN's State of the Union. But in this case, it's Jake Tapper saying the State of the Union is to try to keep up with everything that's going on, but it also has some references to Donald Trump's jokes at the Gridiron dinner last night, so I wanted to include that. And it's only about a minute, well, it's 1 minute and 4 seconds long, which I will talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is just trying to keep up. President Trump said it best himself last night, speaking at the annual Gridiron Club dinner in Washington. He joked that he likes turnover and chaos. His sometimes self-deprecating speech was punctuated with jokes about his son-in-law, Jared Kushner's security clearance, and his tense relationship with Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The president also brought up his new tariff proposal on steel and aluminum imports, calling them very popular. The president now doubling down on that proposal, tweeting that trade wars are good, and tweeting Saturday, quote, "If the European Union wants to further increase their already massive tariffs and barriers on U.S. companies doing business there, we will simply apply a tax on their cars, which freely pour into the U.S. They make it impossible for our cars and more to sell there. Big trade imbalance." The surprise move shocked many in his White House and brought swift condemnation from lawmakers in his own party and threats of retaliation from Europe, Canada, and Asia. Let's go right to the director of the White House Office of Trade and Manufacturing.
Peter Navarro. I have a clip of him from Fox News Sunday, though I let it play through there to show, as I often say, that these news summaries are important because the newsmakers who are later on the show actually watch the news summaries, and it influences the way they answer the questions, even though the newsmaker interviews are, I have a better case for fair use when I take clips of newsmakers than I do the work product of the corporate news media, though I also criticize those. So anyway, and I use them for comparison. I've shown you 3 of the 5 of the big 5 corporate news outlets. I have 2 left, CBS and Fox News, usually the 2 worst. Although, I don't know, Margaret Brennan, this is her second week as the permanent host of Face the Nation, and she's doing news summaries. Here you'll see like a 3-minute, 10-second news summary that rivals the NBC one. It doesn't have the Mike Rogers clip. It does have what ABC showed, that clip of the chief of staff, well, I'll show you the clip. I don't want to. I'll show you the clip and I'll compare it to the others, and we'll talk about it after we watch it together. From CBS's Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan over here. I'll talk about it with you after we watch it here.
Face the Nation. I'm Margaret Brennan. The Trump administration has seen turbulent weeks before, but this one left Washington reeling. On the policy front, the president endorsed positions on gun control that appeared to be more in step with Democrats, confusing Republicans and the NRA. In a freewheeling televised meeting with lawmakers, he suggested that when it came to potential threats,
take the guns first, go through due process second.
That would be unconstitutional. He endorsed a bill tightening background checks at gun shows proposed by Pennsylvania Republican Pat Toomey and Democrat Joe Manchin, and demanded to know why it didn't include raising the purchase age for some weapons to 21.
We didn't address it, Mr. President. Look, I think
why? Because you're afraid of the NRA, right?
The president insisted he wasn't afraid of the NRA, but after meeting with their top lobbyists, the White House signaled he backed off, and the NRA said he agreed with them. Republicans downplayed the president's evolving positions.
Well, you may have noticed that interesting reality TV show at the White House.
But the president had another surprise policy announcement. This one also supported by some Democrats.
We'll be imposing tariffs on steel imports and tariffs on aluminum imports. It'll be 25% for steel. It'll be 10% for aluminum.
Republicans weren't the only ones unhappy with that. The stock market dropped 500 points. U.S. trading partners were furious, and even the Wall Street Journal called it the biggest policy blunder of his presidency. The president responded in a tweet that trade wars are good and easy to win. He later threatened to tax European car imports. On the personnel front, President Trump publicly blasted Attorney General Jeff Sessions again, and new press reports revived an old rumor that National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster was on his way out. Following a day of questioning by lawmakers investigating Russian collusion, the president's longest-serving aide, Hope Hicks, announced her departure from the West Wing. Jared Kushner's security clearance was downgraded as the FBI continues to look into his business dealings. And on Friday, the New York Times reported that the president has privately asked White House Chief of Staff Kelly for his help in moving them, meaning Jared and Ivanka, out. Kelly also had a rough week, admitting to reporters he had not properly handled the security clearance issue, and Kelly aggravated the president when he joked at a celebration for his former department.
The last thing I wanted to do was walk away from one of the great honors of my life, being the Secretary of Homeland Security, but I did something wrong and God punished me, I guess.
At an off-camera press dinner last night, the president made light of the chaos, joking that it's been another calm week at the White House, and it's finally running like a fine-tuned machine. With that, we begin this morning with South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. He joins us from Clemson, South Carolina.
You got to be kidding me.
So once again, you can see that the newsmaker guest there is watching the news summary, which is why it's important to show the news summary as an influence on the newsmaker. And did you notice before I showed that clip, I could not remember the name of Donald Trump's chief of staff, John Kelly, General John Kelly, who used to be the director of Homeland Security. I don't know why I was like blanking on that. That's kind of sad. But you can see in that news summary that John Kelly is kind of having a feud with Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And Jared Kushner, at least according to the CBS news summary, is having problems with his business dealings, which that's, to put it mildly, I think that those were outlined better in, well, I'll show you this clip a little bit later where George Stephanopoulos asked Senator Chris Murphy about the Jared Kushner problems with maybe using his position in the White House for personal gain in like the whole Middle East negotiations. And he has this building in New York, 666 5th Street. That's the address, 666. I'm not making that up. And it apparently he got all this money from his father and he bought it, and now it's like totally in debt, and he needs all this these infusions of cash. And he's met with people in the White House that you saw that in some of the news summaries, that where he got loans after he met with them, which is actually really, at least in terms of the appearance of impropriety, is really bad. And I'll show Chris Murphy in the clip after next talking about that with George Stephanopoulos. But first I want to show the mildest coverage of the chaos at the White House. They do talk about it somewhat, but they really downplay the scandal. The Jared Kushner scandal is really downplayed as just sort of a joke that he lost his security clearance. And, well, of course, this is Fox News Sunday, a brief introduction from host Chris Wallace, and then the wunderkind at Fox News, I guess, Steve Doocy's son, Peter Doocy, who's become quite the correspondent, quite the Fox News bias correspondent, I guess, as I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Even in Donald Trump's White House, this has been quite a week. Sudden changes on gun control, a surprise announcement to impose steep tariffs, and a staff in turmoil. This hour, we'll talk about the new tariffs and the potential for a trade war with White House advisor Peter Navarro and Josh Bolton, head of the Business Roundtable, a coalition of top CEOs. But first, correspondent Peter Doocy with the latest from the White House.
Some of President Trump's most loyal allies are dismayed by this week's Oval Office announcement of steep new tariffs on steel and aluminum imports.
It's going to discombobulate a lot of our economy here.
The Commerce Secretary is trying to quiet complaints.
There's about 3 cents worth of tin plate steel in this can. So if it goes up 25%, that's a tiny fraction of 1 penny.
The president has also been hearing it from governors demanding action on gun control.
So I just suggest we need a little less tweeting here, a little more listening.
As Republican leaders inch towards modest gun control measures, the president had a warning for his own party.
Some of you people are petrified of the NRA. You can't be petrified.
Then he said he had a good meeting with the NRA and seemed to back off some proposals. In the West Wing, policy debates continue as staffers shuffle or struggle to hold their ground. Jared Kushner's security clearance has been downgraded. Communications Director Hope Hicks is leaving. And Attorney General Jeff Sessions was pictured dining with Russia probe leader Rod Rosenstein, hours after the president panned his handling of the FISA abuse scandal.
If you want to work in the Trump administration, know your blood type, because you'll be thrown under the bus.
But officials insist this week's real storm in D.C. was the nor'easter.
I left 3 preschoolers and a bunch of flashlights with the power out at my house. It was pretty chaotic, and certainly far more chaotic early this morning than when I got to the office.
The president took a night off from his feud with the mainstream media last night at the Gridiron Dinner to joke with reporters about the week's unflattering headlines. For example, one presidential punchline blamed a delayed arrival at the dinner on Jared Kushner not being able to get through security. Chris?
All right. Jerry, this has always been an unruly White House, but it really did seem to veer out of control this week. Let's put some of this up on the screen. There were a series of leaks that seemed designed to weaken Jared Kushner. The president called the decision by Attorney General Sessions disgraceful. Economic advisor Gary Cohn is said to be on the verge of resigning over the issue of tariffs, and the president, according to some reports, wants his national security advisor, General McMaster, out. What is going on?
Well, so other than that, it was a great...
So I actually edited that last clip onto the news summary to show that even when Chris Wallace came back to the panel to talk about the chaos at the White House, there's a very light touch as to what the actual scandal is. You know, in terms of Jared Kushner, there was just like the talk about how Jared Kushner is... that Donald Trump made a joke about him at the Gridiron Dinner last night, that, you know, it took a while to get him through security, but they didn't even go as far as the CBS Face the Nation clip previously, that there's problems with his business dealings, and it even goes way beyond that. If, you know, the breaking news over the last few days about Jared Kushner, there was this weird thing that happened last year in terms of the United States foreign policy towards Qatar and Saudi Arabia, or Qatar, some people call it. I never know how to pronounce. I used to play this war game called Oil War, like like 40 years ago or something, and it had this country in it, and I used to call it Qatar, but apparently it's called Qatar, or Qatar, or I don't know. You can pronounce it however you want, but apparently the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, tried to get loans for his New York building, 666 Fifth Avenue, and when Qatar wouldn't give him loans, he sided with Saudi Arabia into this big blockade that actually put American troops at risk, which you'll see Chris Murphy say, talking to George Stephanopoulos in this next clip. But then he says that the only consequences should be, you know, big changes at the White House. Geez, if, like, Jared Kushner put troops at risk, shouldn't the consequence be like jail, like prison for Jared Kushner? Well, that's my opinion, but you can let me know what you think as you watch Chris Murphy have a much milder consequence in mind, apparently, over in this clip where he was talking to George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Morning over here.
You're also a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Let me pick up on this conversation about Jared Kushner with you as well. I mentioned with Chris Christie and Reince Priebus this story how his father, Charles Kushner, met with the Emirates finance minister trying to get Qatari finance minister trying to get financing for their skyscraper here in Manhattan. Did not get that financing, and then a month later, according to The Intercept, I want to read you this. The failure to broker the deal will be followed a month later by a Middle Eastern diplomatic row in which Jared Kushner provided critical support to Qatar's neighbors. Led by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, a group of Middle Eastern countries with Kushner's backing led a diplomatic assault that culminated in a blockade of Qatar. Kushner, according to reports at the time, subsequently undermined efforts by Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to bring an end to this standoff. What do you make of that report?
Well, if it's true, it's damning. If it's true, Jared Kushner has to go. For many of us that follow the Middle East closely, we could not understand why the Trump administration was so firmly taking the Saudis' side in this dispute between the Saudis, the Emiratis, and the Qataris, because the United States has very important interests in Qatar. At the top of the list are thousands of U.S. troops that are stationed in a base there. And so to so firmly take the side of the Saudis against the Qataris, potentially resulting in the downward spiral of the Qatari economy, put thousands of Americans at risk. If the reason for this, if the reason that this administration put U.S. troops at risk in Qatar was to protect the Kushners' financial interests, then listen, that's all the evidence you need to make some big changes in the White House. Let me also, Bray, we're going to have Secretary Commerce Secretary.
Big changes in the White House. That, like I said before I showed the clip, that seems like a fairly mild response to the charge that Jared Kushner changed U.S. foreign policy in order to benefit his business interests. That's, and the funding for this over-leveraged building in New York, 666 Fifth Avenue. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And now I want to show a couple clips on the gun issue, and then on the trade issue, and then a couple clips on the gun issue. Although the last clip with Lindsey Graham is actually on both the gun and the trade issue. But first I want to show this is the Secretary of Commerce for the Trump administration, Wilbur Ross, who was on multiple shows this morning. And this is the clip I promised earlier where Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press kind of laughs in his face when this is definitely about the chaos in the Trump administration. It has to do with the way that Trump came out and announced these tariffs before they had been completely vetted by his, the staff and the bureaucracy of the executive branch. And then Wilbur Ross won't even say that the 25% tariff on steel and the 10% tariff on aluminum is like the final position. He's like, well, that's the president's decision until he makes some other decision. And as you'll see, Chuck Todd kind of laughs in his face in the 1 minute clip over here.
So this is going to happen this week for sure. The way he said it, 25%, 10%.
Whatever his final decision is what will happen.
Meaning this isn't a done deal.
I didn't say that. I just said what he has said, he has said. If he says something different, it'll be something different. I have no reason to think he's going to change.
What does this mean? You just said, well, he may say this and he may say that.
No, I didn't say that. I said he is the one who makes the decision. Right. He has made a decision at this point, 25 and 10. If he, for some reason, should change his mind, then it'll change. I have no reason to believe he's going to change his mind.
He said trade wars are good. They're easy to win. Give me an example.
I think what he's talking about is we have a big trade deficit with the rest of the world. Our cumulative deficit equals the cumulative surplus of the rest of the world. They, therefore, have much more risk in a trade war than we do. That's what I believe he was meaning to say.
But is that the case? You slap this on...
Trade wars are not good, as I'll talk about in just a second. But do you see Chuck Todd laughed in his face? It's like, what he has said is what he has said, but if he says something different, then it will be something different. And it's like, we have no idea what Trump is going to... what his position is from 1 minute to the next. It depends on who he talks to or what he's mad at or... I mean, to Trump's credit, at least, he has had a fairly consistent position on, going after China and going, especially that, we're getting screwed on trade and we have to make them pay. But this is kind of ridiculous. And I thought that Wilbur Ross's answer there was pretty ridiculous. But what was also kind of ridiculous is this argument that, you saw Wilbur Ross in one of those news summaries holding up that Campbell's soup can, and when they talk about the steel tariffs and the trade war and the aluminum tariffs that may lead to a trade war, it's not even just the trade war, it's like a big tax on consumers. And the way that the Trump administration has been trying to deal with it is by trying to divide it up into as small pieces as possible. If we divide the tariff up into how much it costs per can of beer or per car or per Boeing jet or whatever, then it won't seem like billions and billions of dollars as a tax on American consumers. And that's not the only problem with trade wars, but I'll discuss that with you after we watch this next clip, which I criticized Fox News Sunday and Chris Wallace and Peter Doocy especially for having such a light touch on the Trump scandals and not really going into depth as to what is causing people to resign and leave the Trump administration. But I think actually Chris Wallace does a pretty good job in this next clip talking to the White House trade advisor Peter Navarro about this stupid argument trying to cut up the tax on American consumers into these tiny little bits of how much does it cost per aluminum can or per car. And I'll talk about that with you after we watch that almost 4-minute clip from Fox News Sunday over here.
One of the things that both of those senators raised was that this is going to raise prices for American consumers, and the fact is it will. Commerce Secretary Ross estimates that if you take the imported steel that goes into an American-built car, it will increase the price of that car $175. An analyst at the Cato Institute tweeted this: so a new $175 per vehicle tax times 17 million vehicles sold in the USA in 2017 equals almost $3 billion in new annual consumer taxes just for steel and autos. Overall, if I may, sir, if you talk about not just cars, but all the products that use imported steel or imported aluminum, we're talking about a tax on American consumers in the billions of dollars.
I like Secretary Ross's math a whole lot better. Let's do it for aluminum. If you look at a 10% tariff on aluminum, 6-pack of beer or Coke, that's $0.015. If you look at the other end of the spectrum, Boeing 777, it's one of the best airliners ever made. It's a $330 million aircraft. We're talking about an increase in costs at the worst of $25,000. So when you're talking about these massive costs or whatever as a fact, it's not. There are no downstream price effects on our industries that are significant. What we're doing here, and let's be very clear about the mission.
Wait a minute. Even if it's $175 a car and there's 17,000 cars, 17 million cars sold, that is a $3 billion tax.
I guess we would disagree about how to do the math here. $175 on a $30,000 car is less, a small fraction of 1%.
You add it up.
To get that, well, you can do that math.
Sir, if you add it up, we're talking billions of dollars in added costs.
And let's see, last time I checked, we had an $18 trillion economy. It's second order small. There's not enough zeros to get
I know you're a good economist, but the fact is we're talking in billions of dollars, correct?
On a $19 trillion economy. Look, here.
But you agree it's a billions of dollars increase in cost.
What I agree is that the downstream effects of steel and aluminum tariffs are insignificant, and the mission here is to preserve our steel and aluminum industries for national security and economic security. And look,
all right. I want to pick up on exactly that point, because the president, to call you a trade hardliner is an understatement. In 2011, you wrote a book called Death by China that you then made into a documentary. Here is the trailer for that documentary that shows a knife representing China going into the heart of the United States. Some White House senior staff accuse you of guerrilla warfare, saying that you sneak around the West Wing and go into the Oval Office and run around policy meetings to personally lobby the president, and that, frankly, a number of senior staff were surprised when the president made this announcement on Thursday. How do you plead?
I would say that sitting here on a Sunday with you, that's a bit of a cheap shot, that there's no facts and evidence to support that. And if I've learned anything in the 14 months here in Washington in the White House, is that there's all sorts of malicious leaks that go in to try to hurt us. And the culture in the White House now is if they go after one of us, they go after all of us. We're a team together. The president's doing a great job, and I stand on my writings. I can tell you that the China issue is one that we as a country are going to have to address because it's a serious matter.
Mr. Navarro, thank you. Thanks for your time. Please come back. A spirited discussion.
And it actually was a spirited discussion. I actually edited together 2 clips there, the end of the interview with pretty much the beginning of the interview. Like I said, I thought Chris Wallace did a good job being confrontational, both at the beginning of that clip in terms of this weird Trump administration argument where they try to take the billions and billions of dollars that consumers are going to pay because of these steel and aluminum tariffs and cut it into millions and millions of pieces, like all the aluminum cans. And actually they had this other guy from the big corporations come on and say, sure, it's only like 1/3 of a cent per can, aluminum can that, in the United States, but there are 88 billion cans, or he said 1 cent, and 88 billion cans means that's an $880 million tax on American consumers. So you can split it up into little pieces like Peter Navarro tried to do there, or you can compare it, when you have it all aggregated, say, well, it's not that big when you compare it to the size of the economy as a whole, but, it's still a big tax on American consumers, and that doesn't even count what happens if there's a trade war. And the harm that they're trying to punish or trying to get rid of, where the Chinese are like producing more steel than the world needs and they're selling it at a price below what other people can produce it. That's like you're punishing someone for giving you free stuff, or for giving you stuff that's, half the price it costs them to produce it. That's actually in some ways is a benefit to you. There are some possible long-term bad effects where, countries or corporations can try to kill all their competitors, and then they eventually raise prices because they have a monopoly. But that's like that's something that might happen in the future, and at least in terms of the economy, our economic present, that's a benefit when someone tries to give you something for less than it actually costs. So that's like, thank you. I have some more of that? Or, at least in terms of economic selfishness, that's the one thing I wanted to say about free trade and what the so-called dumping. It can hurt workers, it can hurt industries, it can destroy industries over a long term, but at least in the immediate short term, it's like someone's giving you free stuff. Why, it's not like the worst thing in the world. But anyway. Now I want to move on to those last 2 clips on guns, or though actually the Lindsey Graham clip at the end deals with both guns and trade. But this next clip is from CNN State of the Union, and it shows how first there's a clip at the beginning where Jake Tapper shows this weird meeting that Donald Trump had where he seemed to take the position of Democrats against assault weapons, and you'll see Joe Manchin, one of the most conservative Democrat, or probably the most conservative Democrat in the Senate, says, no, we don't want to add Dianne Feinstein's assault weapons ban to the Toomey Manchin bill, which I talked about last week. And, well, this is about 4 minutes long. Like I said, there's an introductory clip from Jake Tapper, and then Joe Manchin seems too optimistic about the possibility of gun control, and but he does say that there is one ingredient that is necessary that he agrees with Republican Lindsey Graham in the next and final clip, which I will discuss with you after we watch this CNN State of the Union clip where Jake Tapper talks to Joe Manchin, the Democratic but very centrist senator from West Virginia, over here.
I'm Jake Tapper. President Trump stunned Republicans and Democrats at the White House this week when he appeared to throw his support behind several Democratic gun control measures, including a proposal from Senator Amy Klobuchar to curb domestic abusers' access to guns, and a proposal from Senator Dianne Feinstein to ban some semi-automatic weapons. The president suggested adding both proposals to a bipartisan bill on background checks from Senators Joe Manchin and Pat Toomey.
So if you could add that to this bill, that would be great, Diane. If you could add what you have also, and I think you can, into the bill. So
Joe, are you ready?
Can you do that? Joe, can you do that? Pat, can you add some of the things? You're not going to agree with me.
Yeah, if you help.
Well, no, I'll help, but can you add what Amy and what Diane have? Can we add them in?
And here with us is Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Thanks so much for being here. That was, first of all, would adding Dianne Feinstein's ban on some semi-automatic weapons, would that help your bill?
No,
or would
that not help our bill at all.
It would kill it.
Yeah, and I've told Dianne that. I'm not taking anybody's guns away from them. We can't even get background checks that makes guns sense. There's not a law-abiding gun owner in America doesn't believe that if you go to a gun show and if you go on the internet, you need to know through a commercial transaction who the person is and what their intent, what their background.
Yeah.
That's all. We protected all the rights of law-abiding gun owners. So our bill is basically crafted that basically accepts a law-abiding gun owner doing the things that we've done in our culture, but also making sure that the bad person or the terrorist that advertise on the internet said, go down to the gun show and get whatever you want. That needs to be closed. That should be the base bill that we work with.
And we covered this extensively in 2013 when you and Senator Toomey introduced it, the NRA lobbying heavily against it and, in your view, misrepresenting sometimes what was in the bill. President Trump on Wednesday, that was him, you just heard him right there.
Yeah.
The next day he met with 3 of the top leaders of the NRA. One of them, Chris Cox, the head lobbyist, tweeted, I had a great meeting with President Trump and the Vice President. We all want safe schools, mental health reform, and to keep guns away from dangerous people. POTUS and VPOTUS, President and the Vice President, support the Second Amendment, support strong due process, and don't want gun control. Hashtag NRA, hashtag Make America Great Again. Very mixed messages from President Trump on this issue. Do you have any idea if the Manchin-Toomey bill were to come to his desk, would he sign it?
I really believe he would.
You believe he would?
I would. In my heart of hearts, I believe that. I would tell Chris, and I know Chris and all, these are good people. This is the position they've taken. And they've been pushed to that position. We worked and kept them involved in the drafting of the bill. They were apprised of everything that we were trying to do in a most responsible way. No one believes that President Trump's going to take your guns away. I'm not going to take your guns away. No one believes that we don't support the Second Amendment rights. President Trump and myself and Pat Toomey. With that being said, we do believe in gun sense that averages 80–90% of the people believe that you should know who that person is before you have a transaction. And commercial transactions is where we have to start. So that is the base bill that we've talked about. We had a great meeting on Wednesday. Chris said the NRA had a great meeting on Thursday. So, okay, we both had great meetings.
Right.
Let's find out where it is. But you got to do something here.
But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is not introducing gun legislation this week. Do you have any idea if he's ever going to bring up?
If the president comes forward and says, this is what I want done, this is what I'm going to support, and I will give you the cover you need. Okay,
so it's up to President Trump.
That's up to President Trump. Truly, he can be the first president, and that can be a legacy for him to do something that takes the commercial transaction of a gun, and openness as it can be, when the internet and the terrorists and criminals can go anywhere they want, under any conditions, in any state, and buy what they want. That's all we're saying. Shut that down, but don't take away my rights as a law-abiding gun owner.
But is it not possible that even after...
So, like I said, that's the most conservative Democratic senator in the Senate, Joe Manchin, and he seems like overly optimistic that that the Manchin-Toomey bill, which is, I don't know, it's not like the least they could do. It actually gets very close to universal background checks, which would be a good thing. That he seems optimistic that will happen, even though he is kind of admitting there that Donald Trump has been veering wildly between seeming to accept Democratic positions, and then he talked to the NRA and he backed off on that. And if you watch that live bipartisan meeting with Donald Trump, it was pretty clear Donald Trump has very little idea what he's talking about, what, the assault weapons ban, or the NICS fix bill, or the Manchin-Toomey bill, or any of those different variations. He doesn't even seem to understand exactly how legislation works if you watch that. And it was, it was pretty disheartening, but not all that surprising if you've been watching him over the last 14 months of his presidency. But I want to get to one final clip. This is a Republican, Senator Lindsey Graham. Like I said when I showed the CBS Face the Nation news summary, and I'll show the very end of that where Lindsey Graham is kind of laughing at the idea that the Trump administration is working like a finely tuned machine, because that's a really big joke. And then he talks about both the possibility of gun control and what he thinks should happen on these whole on the trade tariffs on steel and aluminum. And like Senator Joe Manchin, he seems to think that President Trump is going to show leadership despite all the chaos. And there's a little bit of talk about the chaos in the staff at the end of this clip, and why they have any optimism that Trump is going to show real leadership. That seems beyond me, or I don't understand that, but I will talk about it with you after we watch this final clip, except for the, of course, final bonus Sandy clip at the end. But this is Lindsey Graham talking to Margaret Brennan on CBS's Face the Nation this morning, right after the news summary that Lindsey Graham watched and laughed at over here.
Running like a fine-tuned machine. With that, we begin this morning with South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. He joins us from Clemson, South Carolina.
You got to be kidding me.
Well, Senator, where do we begin here? Do you have a message to the president after this week?
Yes. As to guns, you have an obligation to give us a package to consider regarding school safety and guns. You did a good job talking in front of the country about the problem. Let's come up with solutions that are bipartisan. Propose something, Mr. President, and I think Republicans have an obligation to work with Democrats to make it law if we can. So that's guns. On trade, you correctly identified the problem of China dumping steel throughout the world to destroy the American steel industry. Your solution is let China off the hook. It's only going to hurt American consumers and our allies. Please reconsider your solution.
Well, sir, on the issue of personnel confusion and some policy confusion that you referred to there.
Can't help you on the personnel front.
Well, do you still have faith in Chief of Staff John Kelly? And now there are rumors once again about the fate of the National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster. Are you confident in him?
I'm very confident in H.R. McMaster. I think he's learned as much about the war on terror from fighting it than anybody that I know. I think he's really smart on North Korea and Iran. I hope the president will keep him around, but it's up to the president. He can fire anybody he likes, but I have a lot of confidence in General McMaster. And John Kelly, to me, has created order out of chaos initially, is kind of backsliding now, but I think John Kelly is the right guy to continue to help the president organize his agenda. Have a lot of faith and trust in John Kelly. I hope he stays.
You just came back from the Middle East.
Well, I don't have faith and trust in John Kelly. It seems like the chaos in the Trump administration is accelerating, which Lindsey Graham didn't really seem to recognize in that last clip, although he did recognize that both on this trade issue and on the gun issue, it's going to require leadership from Donald Trump himself, and I just don't think he's much of a leader. He hasn't shown a lot of leadership, on the whole Dreamer thing, which it wasn't even in the news this week, although the DACA executive order is going to expire tomorrow, but it's been stayed by some court action for some period of time, but that's only temporary, possibly until higher courts may have some different opinions, and the Trump administration could have some superseding executive order that is based on actual real facts. And, the reason the courts have done that with DACA is because the Trump administration based its revocation of the DACA order on the fact that it was illegal, which these other courts have said, well, it's actually not illegal. But anyway, that's an issue that was barely covered on the Sunday morning news analysis shows, but is really important to a lot of real people here in the United States. So I wanted to bring that up one last time at the end. And Like I said, that was the last clip, though I do have a bonus Sandy clip, I promised, and I'm not going to forget to play it. This is 14 seconds of me telling Sandy to lie down when she finally showed up right before the show started, and she did lie down, as you can see over here.
Sandy, lie down.
So that's the bonus Sandy clip. I hope you appreciate that. I hope you appreciate the clips I picked out for you. I did notice I had one super chat contribution along the way. You can see $25 from Jade Woods there. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the appreciation of the clips and the work that, the work I put into picking out these clips. I have to watch a lot of hours of shows, and then some hours of processing, and then the hour or so of broadcast here. It's been about an hour and 5 minutes so far. Hopefully it will be the first week that the people watching the recorded show can watch the live chat as an option along the side. That's what YouTube has promised. I guess we'll see after this recorded, or this live stream becomes a recorded archive. I hope that will work this week. I also appreciate all of you who give me monthly support on Patreon. I started sending out my Patreon rewards this weekend. The #LiberalViewer vinyl bumper stickers here, weatherproof vinyl. So, and then of course that's for people who pledge at $5 or above. And then you get this plus the ACLU Constitution for the $10 and above level. And I started sending those out this week. So if you're also someone who has been a patron for a long time, all you have to check your Patreon messages, and you'll see that I've sent you a message. All you have to do is reply with your address, and I will send you out the reward. And I will be using those funds to keep me going for the foreseeable future, and I will be back next week and every week for, I've been doing it for 254 weeks, and I will keep doing it hopefully all the way through the Trump impeachment. That's my goal. And at least based on the mainstream media that keeps feeding me that impeachment porn, like you saw in the first clip I showed. But until next week, or until I find some good reason to upload some edited, produced video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.